Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So back to another focus on Alberta, and I want to introduce you tonight to Rosa Ellithorpe. Rosa is a senior consultant specializing in crisis and strategic communications and government relations at Navigator Limited, Canada's leading high-stakes public strategy and communications firm. I love that, high-stakes public strategy and communications firm. She was born and raised in Alberta. She's previously served in director roles in both the Alberta Progressive Conservative and BC Liberal government caucuses, and recently ran a mayoral campaign for Alberta's capital city. Rosa Ellithorpe, welcome to our show. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, Brian? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And you're joining us from Edmonton right now?
I am. Yep.
Is it
bright and sunny and snowy?
Bright and sunny and cold and snowy, I understand.
Yeah, minus 14, pretty average.
Well, I landed in Fort McMurray last week. It was minus 13. So you're actually colder than Fort McMurray was.
Yeah, you're very lucky then.
It was. They said they've had a couple of negative 40 days, but that was only for a week or so last year.
Oh, good.
So tell me, lots of people are wondering about lots of things in regards to Alberta. They're wondering about the fact that you've got two ethnic mayors in the two major cities, which someone last week when I was out in Alberta said, your two last mayors were Ford and Tory, and in Toronto, and we've had a Sikh and a Muslim in the two capital cities, in the two major cities in Alberta. We're more diverse, we're more ethnic, we're more progressive than you are in Toronto. I thought that was kind of interesting coming from a banker I met in Calgary. And then lots of people are wondering about your premier, who some people have said that his epitaph has been written and his days as a potential leader of politics in Canada are over. I'd love to hear your point of view on that. And then lots of people are questioning about, the resource industry. And so I'd love to hear your views on that. What do you think? Where do you want to start? Let's start.
Where do we start?
Let's start, if we could, with the future of Alberta from an economic standpoint. What do you think?
Well, we actually just released our mid-year update last week, the province did, and it was looking exceptionally well. One of the biggest rebounds we've seen in Alberta's history. That's because we've seen oil prices go up. People starting to come back. We've seen a ton of investment coming back into Alberta because we are a province of entrepreneurs. So while people are looking at the oil and gas industry and we're looking towards that carbon reduction and a lot of calls from environmentalists to push that stuff down, I don't think it's diminished the entrepreneurial spirit here in Alberta. So while every major oil and gas producer is looking at ways to do carbon reduction, we also have people coming in looking at geothermal investments right now in Northwest Alberta. We have people coming in on vertical farming options to expand on our agriculture.
Vertical farming? You don't have enough land in Alberta? You need vertical farming?
Well, year round, lettuce, those kind of things. It gets cold.
Okay.
It's supply chain issues, right? Everyone's looking at the last 2 years, the pandemic. We just had the floods in BC and a huge supply chain for us. So I think right now everyone's had 2 years. Well, we've been in an economic recession with oil prices going down since 2014, 2015. So you've had a lot of people looking at the future, and now we're seeing that investment come back. So I actually am very hopeful about the future of investment in Alberta and the future.
Do you think the investment is coming back? What I heard, and again, it was sort of in casual conversations with different people while I was touring around Edmonton, Calgary, and Fort McMurray in the last little while, was that the companies that are making a lot more money because of higher oil prices are, number one, paying down debt, and number two, declaring higher dividends to their shareholders. And so they're enjoying a higher market value, but they're not reinvesting.
So oil and gas not reinvesting, but I think you're finding other diversified reinvestments. And I think what you're looking at is people being a little bit risk averse because we've done the up and down too many times. So they're trying to get everything paid back. Like you said, debt repayment, get on a steady footing, and let's not put all of our chips on the table for one rebound in oil. Let's get a little bit longer stability. And I think that government is you'd see that they've been pushing that message too. Now that the money has come back, they're not going, oh, we're going to spend. They've still committed to their 4 key pillars of budget management, of not putting too much of a deficit on, continuing to keep the same ratio for debt to investment, those kind of things. So I think you see a lot more people, a little bit more, is it bearish than bullish right now as we start to rebound a bit?
They're bearish rather than bullish.
Is that the term I'm looking for?
No, bearish means they're negative.
Yeah, so they're not pushing forward as much as we would have in the past.
Okay,
right?
so
So we're not
they're being a bit
be,
more reserved. They're taking their
Yes.
time before they make the investment. But bottom line, you are positive about the future of Alberta's economy because of your entrepreneurial spirit and nature.
Yes, and I know like we have the biggest GDP growth rate next year across the country at 6%. They're expecting us to grow at, and then that continues to move forward. So I think oil and gas is not the be all end all here. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of innovation, and I think we'll continue to grow on the strong workforce and the human capital that we have here.
You know, I heard that in both Calgary and Fort McMurray. I'm not sure about Edmonton, but they said that average income's above the national average, so it's twice the national average in Fort McMurray, but it's not that much an increase in Calgary, but it is higher. They said a younger population, a more diverse population, a more well-educated population. Originally attracted because of the oil and gas industry, but they stayed. They bought homes, they grew families. And they set down roots in Alberta, and they're staying, and that's a huge opportunity, and that technology and diversification are the games in the future. What do you think about that?
No, I think it's absolutely correct. So I think Edmonton is one of the top 3 most affordable housing markets in the country. So, we have some of our best universities and post-secondaries in Edmonton, Calgary following not far behind. Calgary's a bit more expensive in the housing market. We're Red Deer and Grand Prairie, some of the youngest cities. I think the average age is 35, 36 for some of these cities. And like you said, well educated. This province right now is doing a huge push on tech investment. We've seen multi-million-dollar, Amazon just invested a multi-billion-dollar investment in Calgary for their cloud hub that's going to be developing the next 10 years. And we have a huge a little unknown secret is that we have a very large BioWare studio here in Edmonton, an Edmonton born and raised studio, video games. So EA actually owns BioWare now. So they are here in Edmonton. And we have a number of spin-off video game companies in Alberta that is growing largely. So
video games, who knew it?
Yeah. So Mass Effect was made in Edmonton. That's a big huge BioWare game. So there's a large system growing from there. We have some of the best artificial intelligence at the U of A. That's why DeepMind from Google chose to put their office here in Edmonton. And then we also have, when we talk about tech and innovation, lots of that stuff spins off into the oil and gas industry. And that's how we've been able to innovate as an industry going forward. Like we used to put, I'm not sure how much you chatted with people up in Fort Mac, but we used to put, they're called pigs that go down the pipe and clean everything out. Now they use interactive digital technology on these pigs that go down the pipe, and you do it through a tech way to check the quality of the pipe.
Not real pigs.
So, no, they're called pipe pigs. They're like basically like a cone. They look, those bullets that go off in Mario Kart or in the Mario games and they fly out of the cannon. That's exactly what they look like.
I'm obviously speaking with someone that is familiar with video games, and I'm not catching the analogies, but I appreciate them. We're chatting tonight with Rosa Ellithorpe. She is a senior consultant at Navigator Limited. We're talking about Alberta. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Rosa in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Our focus tonight is Alberta and its economic future and its political future. And we're chatting with Rosa Ellithorpe. She is a senior consultant specializing in crisis and strategic communications and government relations at Navigator Limited, Canada's leading high-stakes public strategy and communications firm. She's been born and raised in Alberta. She's previously served in director roles in both the Alberta government, the Progressive Conservative government, and BC Liberal government caucuses, and recently ran a mayoral campaign for Alberta's capital city. So a mayoralty campaign, that must have been fascinating.
Yes, it was. I've lived in Edmonton 11 years now. And so when I had the opportunity to take part in kind of shaping our future, I took hold of it. I had a woman candidate, which was great to work with, and learning more about my city and the politics that shapes it was really fascinating. We didn't win, but that's okay. There's always more losers than winners in politics, but as they say, you learn more when you lose than when you win.
and how did she place?
We placed third. Okay. Out of, I think there was a series of 10, but yeah, we were in the top 3.
And the victor, I understand, is a former Liberal cabinet minister. Yes. Is that interesting that, a cabinet minister, and I understand he used to be a bus driver in Edmonton as well. What do you read in his victory?
I read that Edmonton was looking for some stability, some comfort. He is a very kind and like open and caring man, Mr. Sohi, I guess Mayor Sohi now. And he really resonated with, I think that post-pandemic, the negative politics that we're seeing federally and provincially. He didn't bring that into the campaign. The mayoral campaign stayed pretty above that fray, especially in his narrative. And I think that's what Edmontonians were really looking for, was someone they are familiar with, someone that they trusted in leadership positions. They'd seen him in a minister role before, and someone who had some genuine caring for the city. So I think we're in good hands in Edmonton, and it'll be a good 4 years to say the least.
And you've also been involved in provincial governments, both the progressive conservative government in Alberta as well as the Liberal government in BC. And you said you were in caucus. So what were you doing? You weren't actually an elected member. So tell me.
No. I was the director of caucus here in Alberta under the Jim Prentice government. At the end, I worked in government caucus in various roles for about 6 years here in Alberta, and worked my way up to the director of caucus. So that was we had 71 members in our caucus by the 2015 election. And then once that election happened, I transitioned as the chief of staff for the PC caucus in the opposition. And then I went to BC to be the director of research for Christy Clark's caucus.
So Jim Prentice had please correct me if I'm wrong, but a reasonably progressive reputation. So he wasn't a right-wing conservative. He was more of a progressive conservative. And Christy Clark, even though the Liberal government or Liberal Party in BC is more a conservative party and a conservative government than it is a Liberal, I think the name is wrong. She also was thought of as reasonably progressive, not necessarily right-wing. Why did you choose those two people to work for?
Well, it's funny you say that, because I find sometimes in Alberta I'm not conservative enough. And I went to BC and I was too conservative. So I sit very much firmly on the red Tory line. I chose those leaders really because I think we don't need to do politics in the, like you said, the far right wing, far left wing. And we can find those common sense solutions together. They always looked at things a little bit differently and always found the answers, and they were genuine and kind people. So that's definitely why I picked that. They aligned most with my values of actually managing things fiscally and allowing private and business and nonprofits to do their job while creating a business-friendly environment.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your educational background? When did you first get involved in politics? And why did someone like you get attracted to being involved in politics?
It's actually kind of a funny story. It was an accident. I grew up in a very small town northeast of Edmonton. It's a very Ukrainian town called Two Hills. And at the time when I was growing up, former Premier Ed Stelmach was our MLA. So just being in a very small town where your local politicians are very involved, I was very exposed to it and interested in school. And then I took off to Calgary for university for a business degree. I had plans to I did an international business degree. I had plans to join the Foreign Service and travel the world. When I was done with that, we kind of hit the 2008 dip in the economy when we had one of our oil crashes. And I came back to Edmonton and I started working at a oil and gas distribution center. Didn't like it, so my girlfriend said, why don't you apply here? We're always hiring people. And I applied for a research position in the government caucus and interviewed between the first and second leadership vote where Alison Redford won. And I was hired under that government. And so it was kind of just happened from there. But once I got into it, I loved it. I loved being able to be involved in creating legislation, learning so much. One of my roles was a caucus coordinator. So I coordinated the regional caucuses. So Northern, Capital Region, Calgary, Southern Caucus, and learned all the stakeholders that came from there. And it's just such a vast and diverse province. And once you get into it and you can see that you can form policy and help people, it kind of becomes addictive.
I met with a couple of people in Calgary last week, and they told me, as we were chatting just over lunch and dinners, that people perceive Alberta as a unity. And they said Calgary and Edmonton are very different than the rest of Alberta, and that a lot of the very right wing, anti-masker, anti-vaccine kind of element that some people perceive Alberta to represent may be part of Alberta, but it's not Calgary and Edmonton. What do you think about that?
I think that's fair. I think, we often get Calgary and Edmonton often get equated to Houston and Austin. with Edmonton being Austin, a little bit more blue collar, a little bit more boho, kind of laid back. We're a university and a government town, whereas Calgary is very corporate. You have more white collar. The anti-maskers, I think you find them everywhere. I don't think it's concentrated in one area. I think just some might be a little bit louder than others. We did find that many of them were traveling from location to location in Alberta. It wasn't just they all came out in one town and then there was a group in the next town. So I think sometimes that gives us a poor reputation, but I think we've seen this across the country that those are there. So even in the smaller areas, like you look at the place like Medicine Hat, which is very rural, they've done exceptionally well in their homeless population. Somewhere like Lethbridge, it's far south, and a university town, doing really well, and they're like a liberal town. And when we think Alberta, it's all conservative, but you get different pockets, and like we're not just a giant melting pot. We're very diverse.
That's interesting, because I think too often we in the East get one perception of Alberta, probably just like you guys all think of Ontario as one big Toronto, and so it's a perception that may not be accurate. The other issue that came up and over again was Western alienation and Western separation, and talked about the Maverick Party, and that the Maverick Party in the last federal election didn't do nearly as well as some people thought. The PCP party with Maxime Bernier did do reasonably well, but the Maverick Party did not. But that, even Saskatchewan's talking about separation from Canada, and some of these attitudes, Wexit attitudes, and Alberta were there. What do you think? What's the chance that Alberta or Saskatchewan either separate and or just those factions end up taking a increased sense of power, if not a balance of power?
So I don't think we will be anywhere close to separation. I think we should drill down to why we are even there in the first place. We've had a province that has, from when was it with Lougheed fighting for the National Energy Program. So we've had people that have fought for, I don't want to call it independence, but fought for their rights in the Confederation for 4 decades already. And we've done well and built ourselves up and became a very prosperous place. And now we've had 5-6 years of not a lot of prosperity. So you have an entire generation or 2 generations of people who have done very well that are being told by an entire world that what you've done to build your life is not worthwhile, and we're actually judging you for it. So it creates a lot of, when I'm thinking about it as an individual, never mind a society, if I'm told every day that what I built my life on is bad and it's ruining
oil and gas.
Yeah. It's bad and ruining the world, you're going to become defensive, and you're going to become prideful, and you're going to there's so much pride in the province. And I think that as we do this and we look at how people are reacting, and I think this is where this independence movement is coming from, is this pride and this thing, we all know Ralph Klein's famous words, let the Eastern bastards freeze in the dark. We have a saying in my family, I think my Nana still spits on the floor, is, the only good thing that comes from the East is the sun. So it's been generationally built into us, even though we want to be part of the Confederation. There's an amount of pride. And when people start to struggle, even if it's a short-term struggle, it builds up a lot.
Only good thing that comes from the East is the sun.
Yeah, I like
your Nan is very eloquent.
Yeah, I like joshing my my Toronto colleagues with that term every once in a while. But so I don't think we'll actually get to the point of separation or that level of independence. But there is always going to be that kind of fierce spirit here in Alberta, and I think that's why we saw Premier Kenney rise to unity the way he did. He saw that fight was still inside people, and they were reminded of the National Energy Program, and they were reminded of the hate against former Prime Minister Trudeau, and he built on it. And that's why he was able to unify the party in 18 months and win an election.
And that success was unparalleled. It was really quite impressive. I've had the chance of meeting Premier Kenney personally, socially, a couple of times, and he has got to be one of the most intelligent, articulate individuals I've met. I ended up going to a Catholic Christmas party event with him, and ended up having a religious conversation with him. And the guy knew tons of scripture by heart. He was incredibly well read. And then we ended up having a big discussion about the role of immigration and diversity in Canada. And he was passionate passionate about the positive role that diverse people play in Canada. And that was obviously during his time of, what was it called? Captain Curry. Wasn't that his name at one point in time?
Oh, Curry in a Hurry.
Curry in a Hurry. Thank you. I apologize. But in the last little while, sort of people are saying Premier Kenney is done, and his political future is no more. Tell us what you think about Premier Kenney.
Well, I think the Premier has, well, like you said, his rise to bring unity was unprecedented, and he did an exceptional job of organizing and winning over the party. He got hit with a double whammy of, the OPEC oil crisis, where they dropped oil prices into the tank and we suffered, and then COVID. And he's also challenged with keeping we spoke earlier about Christy Clark with her unified BC Liberal Party, where you kept the far right Conservative and the more liberal side. He's been charged with that. Is his future certain right now? I'm not sure, but if things start to recover and the economy starts to recover and COVID stays under control, he has a good chance. He still has loyalty around his cabinet table. You don't see people in cabinet speaking out against him. It's very much backbench. He had one person in cabinet who did that, and she is now sitting on the backbench. And they're trying to be very flexible with allowing people to have their ideas. Like we listen to member statements and stuff that when I was a director of caucus, I think I would have panicked and pulled a member statement that some of them speak of, but he's really trying to allow people to have their voice. Will it work for him? I'm not certain. But I do think he has an opportunity right now. He just needs to grab it and start bringing in all sides of the party.
I have to admit, I heard Rachel Notley's name like more frequently than you would almost ever hear an opposition party's leader's name last week. Tell me what you think of Rachel Notley.
I think Rachel's done an exceptionally good job. Normally, if you lose an election, a party would replace you. They made the choice to keep her on, and she's done an exceptionally good job of staying steady as a leader, keeping a loyal team. And I saw it over the last, we're starting to return back into the public eye. We had the Alberta Urban Municipalities Convention a few weeks ago, followed by the Rural Municipalities Convention. And I saw a much larger presence of the NDP caucus there that you wouldn't normally see out and about. And they are starting to work very strategically within the rural areas that they think they can target. So as a party and as a leader, she is playing the game well. Is that going to mean that she's going to be able to outmaneuver the UCP party outside of Edmonton? I'm not certain yet. But if this continues with our health crisis and the nurses and the doctors and the teachers continue to push against, and everybody in Alberta knows a nurse, doctor, a teacher, how you show up to vote. That'll put this government at a major risk if she's able to keep things moving. And I don't think they take that lightly.
We're chatting tonight with Rosa Ellithorpe. She is a senior consultant at Navigator Limited. We're chatting about Alberta, the economy, the politics, life in Alberta, and how Rosa's Nana says the only good thing that comes from the east is the sun. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Rosa in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're focusing on Alberta tonight and its economic and political future. Our guest is Rosa Ellithorpe. Rosa is interesting. She's a senior consultant specializing in crisis and strategic communications and government relations at Navigator Limited, Canada's leading high-stakes public strategy and communications firm. She's born and raised in a small Ukrainian town in northeastern Alberta, where her grand says the only good thing that comes from the east is the sun. She's previously served in director roles in both the Alberta Progressive Conservative and BC Liberal Government caucuses, and she recently ran a mail-to campaign for Alberta's capital city. She's an interesting individual in that she didn't ever think about politics, wasn't involved in politics, went to university in Calgary thinking she's going to become an international business person. Oil crisis happened. She was unemployed and ended up getting a great job in politics. And it's been a love of politics ever since. So Rosa, that's an interesting story. And maybe there were omens along the way that led you to your current future. Let me ask you, if I could, about the Alberta economy. The big issue that lots of people have been talking about clearly is climate change and the impact that oil, gas, bitumen, et cetera, has on carbon emissions. That we're going to have carbon taxes, that we're going to have regulations that restrict pollution. That, as you said, in fact, some people may be actually telling Albertans and people in the oil and gas business that what they've been doing for the last couple of generations is not good for the planet, for the economy. Unquestionably, a lot of people are announcing that they're going to be going carbon neutral or reducing their carbon footprint. GM has announced that they're going to have all electronic cars. Other people are saying similar things. And then at the same time, you've got people talking about how they're going to be able to convert Alberta oil and bitumen into the hydrogen economy. And we're going to be able to capture carbon, and that there's still going to be a future, but we're just going to do other things with it. What's your assessment? If you had someone that came and wanted to invest in the Alberta economy that was subject to the fluctuations of the economy based on oil and gas, what would you tell them? What would be your recommendation?
I would tell them, welcome to Alberta. I hate to use the political line, but like, we're open for business. Edmonton, an area in particular, has really seen, and this is maybe the unfortunate part of climate change, but we're preparing to be the path, like the gateway to the north. As climate starts to change, we need different trade routes. So we've started the investment in the hydrogen hub right now in the Heartland. That's where one of the first carbon capture storage projects was done. And you mentioned electric vehicles. And when we talk about oil sands and the knowledge that we have here in Alberta in mining and reclamation, we are now looking at how we know that China controls 98% of the world's rare earth metals. And now we have an opportunity to do that here in Alberta. We know we're sitting on, and Saskatchewan as well. So, we might not, like you said, people are trying to pay debt down in the oil and gas area, but if we continue with a steady hand and invest wisely, we can diversify our energy economy into lithium mining, into recycling. I know Saskatchewan's starting their lithium recycling plant. We have an opportunity to do that here. Natural gas is still very much a thing here in Alberta, which is seen as a cleaner alternative to coal as we try and get people to reduce their emissions, especially internationally. I just listened to stuff about Europe's coal burning this morning and how they're trying to move off of coal burning to reduce their emissions, and discussions about nuclear. I would say that we are a place that has skilled labor, skilled talent, and a lot of innovation that's available, and people who are willing to take risks on investment to create the next new thing. So that, for me, is what I would tell someone that was coming here to invest.
What do you think about this whole hydrogen economy? Is there a chance to really convert oil and gas to hydrogen?
That would be a bit more beyond my scientific knowledge and the expertise. They seem to believe that there is. The investment's definitely coming here, and it's what they're working on. So I'm hopeful for it as we start to look and transition. We're coming from a farming community, the environment has always been very important to us. So that's been drilled into me from the beginning. So something that will offer us a solution and a lower carbon economy and a lower carbon option is definitely hopeful. So as we continue with this technology, I'm hoping that Alberta can lead the way in that transition. What about carbon capture? People talk about, putting the carbon back in the ground, putting it back where the oil came from. Like, is that all really possible? The technicians say that. My business degree doesn't say that, but one thing that I'm hearing is what they're doing is even taking the carbon capture and what's going in the ground and using that heat to heat greenhouses and doing other things and transitioning that economy. So did we, how many years ago was it when we first struck oil in the Duke? Did we know it was possible to pull anything from the ground then and start a car? Now we're literally sending people into space with jet fuel and stuff like. So I think anything right now is possible. Like, is the science there? It seems to be, and that's why people are investing millions of dollars into it, or billions really. But I would have to be a little bit more of a technical expert to tell you if carbon capture is possible. But we are investing in working our way to try and reduce our emissions as much as possible with those options. I got the pitch in Fort McMurray that bitumen from the oil sands is actually far less carbon impactful, climate change impactful than shale gas that you've got from the United States and from northeastern
northwestern Alberta, northeastern British Columbia, where a lot of gas comes from shale, and that it's certainly a lot less impactful than coal. And China's still building a lot of coal, and Canada's still shipping a lot of coal to China and to Asia. And they went back and said, yes, we're going to electrify, but where's the electricity going to come from? And it's not going to come from solar and wind, and we're not going to build the nuclear power plants, and so therefore it's going to come from oil and gas. We just got to make the oil and gas as clean as possible. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a fair statement. I think we do have opportunity in other areas. Like, we're not going to totally abandon solar and wind. We also have hydro in if Site C Dam gets going, those opportunities. And I don't know if I would completely dismiss nuclear. That might be a few decades down the road, but those things are being investigated right now. But I don't think that the need for oil and gas will ever completely disappear, not in my lifetime, certainly. And if you look, we shipped the highest amount of barrels of oil out of Alberta this last week, 2 weeks ago, into the States. So production is up there. The demand is there. It's just, and this feels like a very quintessentially Alberta thing to say is, do you want it from an ethical producer, or do you want to get it somewhere else? And that's a choice we need to make as a world, and figure out how we're going to continue to move towards our targets and our Paris Agreement.
It does seem interesting the way that Putin and Russia is putting it to Germany right now, and forcing upon them, because while they've invested a ton of money in alternative energies, they still rely for most of their heat on gas that comes from Russian gas fields.
Yep. No, exactly. And I think we've seen just even the last 2 years with our supply chains, like energy independence is a huge thing as we move forward. And if you're going to be getting your energy from places, do you want it from friendly nations, or do you want to be put in a vice grip by nations that might not be as friendly? So we can shut everything down here, but what is that doing for ourselves and the world in general?
Was the federal government right to buy a pipeline?
Can I rewrite history? Like, it would have been nice to have it approved along the way before we had to buy it, but I don't want to say if it was right or wrong. Maybe it was just necessary for the time.
Okay. So you're pretty positive about the Alberta economy.
I am.
What about Fort McMurray? Because, when you think about Alberta, you've talked about a lot of things that they've diversified, including video games and things like that in Edmonton. Fort McMurray is all about the oil sands.
Yes. But it's also all about innovation in what they do and how they extract oil sands, and how they extract and how they produce. So I think you have the talent there. So they're going to continue. They might not be stripping new oil sands. Just a little personal fact: my mom used to be a 777 rock truck driver up there that used to strip the land. So I don't know if you saw them when you were up there, the big giant ones with the tires that you're about a quarter the size of.
They're massive. I understand that each tire is $100,000, and they carry, is it true, 400 tons of stuff?
It's massive. And if you run over there's been a few times where they've ran over a vehicle that was empty, no one in it. But if you back over when you don't even notice it,
it completely flattens the vehicle.
Yeah. So you might not see.
And your mom was the driver of that.
Yeah. Yeah. She used to be up there for quite a few years doing that role. So
I came back from my trip actually, and chatted with someone that in conservative party person, very supportive of infrastructure investment and resources and stuff like that, who had never been to Fort McMurray. And I said that I had never been more impressed with an infrastructure investment and an industrial development. I've had the privilege of touring steel yards and investing in them in Hamilton. I've toured coal mines in the Rockies. The closest I ever got was the Shanghai Harbor, which is the largest harbor in the world. And lights on, looks like Manhattan with all the lights at night. It's just an unbelievable. This thing was unbelievable. The camps that house 7,000 people, and there were several of them. What do you call them? They're not refineries, because all they do is boil away the sand, but they're massive, and they create this huge cloud above them. And I was told it wasn't smog; it was just vapors from the steam.
Right.
But they're like, the development is huge. There's 300 buses a day that go from Fort McMurray up to the oil fields. This highway that I went up, that's about a half an hour long out of Fort McMurray, I understand is like packed with rush hour traffic every morning and every evening. The parking lots up at the plants were packed with trucks and vans that SUVs that came from Fort McMurray. It is an unbelievable industrial development.
It's a feat of human engineering and design. You talk to anyone about people that live up there in the community, or people like, I think I'm trying to remember at its height what I don't want to call them the transient population, basically the working population would come in and out. Like you're talking, WestJet used to fly 9 flights a day up there from Edmonton or Calgary, like insane, just full of workers. Work camps, people that went in and out. Like I know people that would work it for 20 days and fly to Mexico for 10 days on their days off. It was a fascinating, well, it is still a fascinating. I'm happy to hear it was so busy when you were up there. And that was what was the challenge when those fires hit as well. And what was the panic, because there's but the only way everyone got out is because they're all emergency trained and had trucks, and everyone got out together and knew how to do emergency evacuations. But no, it is quite the feat. But I do think that they will continue to build. It's a young population still too, the people that are there. So they're still moving forward, still building on things, and the oil sands aren't going to just drop off. It just might slow down. You might not see the new development. You'll just see sustained development.
We're chatting tonight about Alberta with Rosa Ellithorpe. She's a consultant with Navigator Limited. We're going to take a break for some final messages and come back with some concluding comments in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We've been chatting tonight with Rosa Ellithorpe. She is a consultant with Navigator Limited. It's a public policy, government relations, crisis management company, and she, I guess, helps all those people with all those problems, particularly, I presume, in Alberta and Edmonton. So if we have a problem with a spill, you're the person to call. The topic tonight has been Alberta. We've been talking about the Alberta economy. We've been talking about Alberta politics and Jason Kenney versus Rachel Notley. We've been talking about Western separation or Brexit. And also, Rosa, you said that you're a red Tory. And so I want to ask you a question because, you're a rare breed, I think. Not a lot of people are proud to call themselves progressive conservatives or red Tories anymore. Stephen Harper actually changed the party away from being the Progressive Conservative Party to only being the Conservative Party. And I think, and I've interviewed a bunch of different people, that one of the challenges that the Conservative Party has had is they've lost suburban Mississauga, Brampton, York, Markham, Durham, etc., and the similar areas around Montreal and the similar areas around Vancouver. I'm not sure about Alberta. It seems like they've still got a stranglehold on a lot of seats in Alberta, but that vote-rich suburban areas that are, I would think, red Tory, progressive conservative, or if they're liberal, they are blue liberal, they're right wing or more conservative leading liberals, and they're swing ridings. The Conservative Party in the last couple of years has lost them. They lost them with Stephen Harper in his last election against Justin Trudeau, and clearly Andrew. Oh my gosh, what was his name? Scheer. Andrew Scheer. I apologize, Andrew Scheer, and
you might be like the rest of Canada on that one.
Andrew, thank you. I apologize about that. Actually, he's a wonderful gentleman. I've socialized with him a bunch of times. He's a great guy, good guy to go to a hockey game with. And then your current leader has not connected with suburbanites, those swing voters. Do you think there's a chance that the Conservative Party can come back? And if so, what do they need to do? Is Aaron O'Toole the person that can do it, your current leader, or do they need to make a change?
Well, he definitely tried, but that hasn't worked well for him. And because when he ran his leadership versus his campaign, I think the base really saw that as a shift that they were not expecting on the more progressive issues. I think what we need to do as conservatives in general is recognize who the voting demographic is now. It's not my grandparents anymore. It's me. I'm a generation of people who I've always been a have. I haven't been a have not. I don't understand. And like I'm saying, as a generation, we don't understand the effects of debt. I didn't have double-digit inflation in the 80s that I had to deal with. We didn't have those things. So right now, carrying a credit card balance is a thing. So if you're going to keep harping on the government for debt and deficit and those things, it's never going to resonate with us for red Tories. What I want to know is that the economy is secure for me to have a job, and that the people that don't are being taken care of. And that might be a little bit more on those progressive side. Some might call me a bit of a socialist for it, but the reality is, if we don't create an environment where everybody has an ability to work or earn a living, then we're going to continue down these paths. And we've seen, lots of conversation around addiction, around crime, around those things that just haven't worked for, the last 90 years. We're still dealing with the same problems. So there's an entire generation like me that's looking for new solutions. And if the Conservatives can grab onto something like that and stop going back to the same well, I think we can really make some progress.
So Aaron O'Toole
really
tried to take you to the center, and he called it a Cameron from UK kind of a strategy that David Cameron, the Prime Minister in the UK, took the Conservative Party in the UK to the center and won. And lots of people were saying if he's successful, he'll change the Conservative Party forever. But if he's not, the Conservative Party might go back to the right wing. And certainly the people that have been clamoring for Aaron O'Toole's departure have been those right wingers. So what do you think what's going to happen the next year? Is Aaron O'Toole going to survive, or are we going to have, and if he doesn't, are we going to have a shift back to right wingers?
Well, I think he's going to be able to, he has to put work in, like plain and simple. He has to get down into his party membership and put the work in and talk to them and earn that trust back. Because I think there's even people on the progressive side they felt a little bit shocked and surprised by the way he pulled the party. I was pleasantly happy when I started seeing the announcements. I was like, oh, this is great. Finally, we're talking about this. But it wasn't what the party voted for as far as leadership goes. So he's got to do some work to earn that trust back. And if he can't earn the trust back of his caucus and his membership, then he might not make it through. And we will be in another leadership race, and then people will decide which way they want the party to go. And that is kind of the beauty of party membership and the grassroots that we will always strive to work towards.
Do you speak French? Are you bilingual? When are you going to run?
I do not speak French. I speak Prairie French, so very minimal. But it'll be, if I do run, it'll be a few years. I've got a lot of professional things to take care of before I put my name on a ballot.
Rosa Ellithorpe from Navigator Limited, a crisis management company. You've been very helpful in talking about Alberta, both from an economic standpoint and a political standpoint. Your confidence about Alberta and its entrepreneurial nature, its diversification, and that the oil and gas industry is attacking carbon issues with a zest, I think is encouraging. And so I really appreciate it. And I happen to agree with your points of view on what the Conservative Party needs to do. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years. Thanks for joining us.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
That's our show for today, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm on every Monday through Friday on 9:60 a.m. at 6 p.m. You can also get me, Rosa, online at www.saga960am.ca from anywhere in the world via the internet. And all my podcasts and videocasts are on after the fact on my website, briancrombie.com. You can get me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Apple, Audible, and Speakeasy. Thanks for joining me. Good night, everybody.